Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Graham from the School of Teacher Education at National Taiwan Normal University. Welcome to my office hours. All right, what's today's question?
Okay, so do you know there's a phrase called 晶晶体?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's this idea of switching, I guess, indiscriminately between the two languages.
Yeah. So do you think bilingual teacher can use 晶晶体 when they are teaching? For example, like 今天的作业是要回家提出一个 project or proposal.
This is a complicated question,
Okay.
and it's one that I think a lot of professors will debate. What the professors that are in favor of it will say is they will say that, well, that's what naturally happens between bilinguals. So, especially Taiwanese bilinguals, if you go into, for example, my wife's office, you will often hear them doing that when they're speaking to each other, Taiwanese to Taiwanese. So that's the argument for it, because they would say that that's what happens in society. We should allow that. On the policy side, the Ministry of Education has very directly said, don't do that. The policy statement from the Ministry of Education is this. When a bilingual teacher says a sentence, they should say the complete sentence in one language and finish that sentence before they move into another language. So in other words, no mixing within a sentence. You're allowed to say one sentence in language A and then say another sentence in language B under that policy.
See.
But what you cannot do is use language A and then in the middle of the sentence put a language B word.
Yeah.
They discourage that for teachers. I think the Ministry of Education is understanding of that students may do that thing, but they discourage teachers from doing it.
So if they discourage teachers to do this, what about like teacher just unconsciously misuse, like missing Chinese and English in one sentence?
Well, I don't think there's a Ministry of Education police. So I don't think there's going to be like a policeman at the door. They'll knock on the classroom door if a teacher does it. I think what they're really saying is they're telling teachers to be aware of this and try to consciously choose one language or another in a sentence. And actually, in terms of purposely using languages in the bilingual classroom, I'm very supportive of that. Because I think one of the key things, one of the key difficulties for a bilingual teacher is the fact that in addition to planning your lesson, a bilingual teacher has to make a purposeful plan of how languages will be used within that lesson. It adds a step to the lesson planning process. So I think this idea of asking teachers to be purposeful and conscious of their language use, I generally support that. If a teacher, if a teacher does it just like naturally every now and then, I don't think it's a big deal. Like I said, no, there's no MOE police that's going to knock on the door, and I'm not going to come after anybody. I think that's fine because, again, the proponents of it say it's a natural thing. And I acknowledge that that's a natural thing to do. So sometimes it may just naturally happen. But what we want to try to do is not make it a habit. And the reason is why you wouldn't want to make it a habit is that while, yes, it happens in society, what we're doing in a bilingual classroom is about training for society. It isn't necessarily supposed to resemble society. And we could say that about school in general. Sometimes when we get into educational debates, people will say, oh, well, you shouldn't do that in school because that's not how it's done in the real world. Well, I think that's a misunderstanding of how learning actually works, though. And I'll use a sports analogy. When a basketball coach is working with the basketball team, they don't just do scrimmages and play the game in their practice and that be that and then go play the game
Yeah.
later. They do drills, they do exercise, they look at specific things. And so, while yes, mixing happens in society, and that's fine, we understand that. What we want to do is we want to be able to train our students to be able to use the language in different scenarios, because the prerequisite for that mixing to happen is that the other person that you're speaking with is also a bilingual.
Yeah.
We're not doing bilingual education so Taiwanese can speak to other Taiwanese. We're using bilingual education so that students can use English with those that don't speak Chinese. So that there's a common language, a common international language. And so, again, we're kind of training for that. In which case, we want teachers to be more purposeful about how they use language for that part of their bilingual life, speaking with other people. Because with Taiwanese speaking to Taiwanese, that's going to happen naturally anyway.
Yeah. So now we know that it's better for a teacher to use a complete sentence in one language. So, like there's one thing that teacher may happen in their class is that, although that is a bilingual class, but with some low English proficiency student, there may be like 80% of Chinese and 20% of English, or even low. So how can teacher like balance this percentage?
Well, I don't promote percentages, and I think that's very important. We should not be promoting a bilingual education with percentages. So you're going to a bilingual class with very low proficiency, you're right. They're probably not going to hear a lot of English, but when they do hear English, it should be, according to the policy, a complete sentence. I don't think that's a problem, and that's why we're doing bilingual education and not English medium instruction in the K through 12 schools in Taiwan, is so that there are options to make the choice. I will use English here because students can comprehend that, even if it's a short period of time. And then I'm going to use Chinese for this next segment because that's beneficial.
Sure. So let me grab some keywords in this important issue. Like it needs to be comprehensible for student to understand the language, and also it needs to be some. Although it is just little exposure for student, but they heard it and they have some opportunity to say the English, so that is enough. Right?
Yeah. Cool. All right, we'll end it there. So that's the end of today's episode. Thank you for attending my office hours. If you have a question about Taiwanese bilingual education or anything about this episode in particular, send me an email at kmgraham@ntnu.edu.tw. I'll see you next time.